this is the pre-show banter that we'll probably include in the show. I'm seeing this Nick Saban retirement news coming down the pike. Do you react to something like this the way I do, where it's like, it's a big deal, but it seems like a boring thing to have a take about? Or do you just look at it and go, I relish having a take about it?
No. You have good instincts on this type of stuff. Big difference between big story and great topic. So you know what I mean? Like, it is a massive story and it is huge news. It is not a great, for me, like if you're if you're a Feinbaum, or if you want to actually, dig into, is he the greatest college football coach of all time? Like, that can be an interesting topic. Are he and Belichick going to team up together somewhere? Kind of ride off into the sunset together. That's interesting. But yeah, I feel the same way. But I'm also not a huge college football guy. I understand it is a massive story. I don't think it's a great topic.
Yeah, I have that feeling of, damn, I wish this big story was something that I had anything to tack on, anything to say, anything about. I saw you and Bomani mention that a marriage can withstand being a pro football expert or a college football expert, but not the hybrid, not the combination. And I think
that's
right. True.
Yeah, no. I don't think it's possible to be successfully married with kids. And I shouldn't say it's possible. I haven't been able to thread the needle of, there's going to be 5 months a year where all day Saturday and Sunday I'm just unavailable.
Do it again. Welcome to the House of Strauss.
Yeah, go for it.
Stars hang with stars, winners hang with winners.
It is House of Strauss. We are thrilled to be joined by, first things first, co-panelist Nick Wright and host of the What's Right podcast, friend of the pod. And to give a quick intro, Nick, you wanted to turn the tables on me. You wanted to grill me a bit, and it seems like this is your occasion to do so. So that's what we're going to do, and bounce around other things.
Well, yeah, so a little context. Ethan and I don't know each other personally as far as like been in the same room as human beings together, but I feel like we know each other quite well professionally. You've been on the TV show. I've been on the pod a number of times. And I think we both have, I like to think, a very healthy respect for the work each other does, which is why I was so disappointed and angered when I read your Rodgers column, because I wanted to give the context that I like and respect you, because I don't want to come across like an asshole, but I'm going to for a moment. You either through an oversight, which seems impossible, or intentionally, which seems worse, left out what I think is the single key piece of information in the beginning of the Rodgers-Kimmel feud, which then I think allowed the off-ramp of, oh my goodness, all of this reactionary media taking Kimmel's side when there's no reason to believe what everyone seems to believe. And so I am going to explain what I'm saying. Okay. You wrote, why would Rodgers say this about, what he said last week if he's not insinuating that Kimmel's on the list? Well, naturally, because Kimmel publicly went after Rodgers for wanting the list to come out. But there's more here. Kimmel used his Jimmy Kimmel Live talk show to roast Rodgers for, among other positions, the quarterback's interest in the Epstein files. In March of 2023, Kimmel played a McAfee show clip for his audience where Rodgers said the following, and you write, "Did you hear about the Epstein client list that's about to be released too? There's some files that have some names on it that might be getting released pretty soon. Kimmel did a mocking dumb guy, to mimic the reaction to show on the show to Aaron's reveal. Jamie then said, might be time to revisit that concussion protocol, Aaron. And then you write, I can't say I'm an expert on how Kimmel's show works, but this seemed rather odd to me as monologue fodder. Why would the audience think it's bad or stupid to believe that Epstein had a client list that names would be revealed? Incidentally, this is actually what ended up happening. That leaves out the entire premise of this was Kimmel was doing a bit on UFOs, and Rodgers brought up the Epstein list in conjunction to he was positing that the UFO hearing was happening to distract America from the Epstein list. That is what Kimmel was making fun of him for. That is clear
I think
obvious.
I think it's a shaky premise based on how that interaction went. And I think if you see the Kimmel clip, there's a reason why it's jump cutting around like the Homer Simpson defending himself about the gummy DeMilo and the sweet can scene for those of you out there who are Simpsons fans. I think that conversation was a little more scattershot between those guys, a little more fucking around. And I don't think that it was a layup comedically. I think it was an odd choice by Kimmel.
No. Okay, so you can say it's an odd choice. Totally fair. And that Kimmel has a grudge with Rodgers. Totally fair. But to not include in your piece ever that the initial Epstein barb between them was that Rodgers was alleging that the government was holding UFO hearings to distract us from the Epstein list 8 months ago, to me, leaves out the entirety of the context. So to which I would then ask you the very simple question. What do you think that Aaron Rodgers was alleging?
We're talking the second time, not the first time. The first time I would say, give me the quote where he made that allegation. And this might be the difference here. I might be a bit more of a literalist on this particular issue. No. I'm talking about in the original clip that Kimmel was making fun of. And God damn it, this crazy story is such a rabbit hole. And it's somehow so complicatable being so dumb. But Rodgers did not actually explicitly say this was happening and say that the government is using the UFOs to distract us from the Epstein list. They were talking about how it's curious that this is coming up. Around that time, there were, balloons. There was the Chinese balloon that got shot down or whatever. And they were just jumping around topics. I feel like this was not a layup again for Kimmel to make a deal out of. Now, to what you're saying, what do I think that Rodgers was saying about Kimmel and saying Kimmel was among those who didn't want the list to come out? And I would say to you what he literally said. He did not say that Kimmel would be on a list. He did not make such a claim explicitly. And I would argue that this whole thing has been a game of telephone, that there was an internet influencer. It has not been
a game of telephone. And it is not an instance of the internet choosing sides because they love Kimmel and hate Rodgers. And it's not an instance of Kimmel being tricked by Colin Rugg. It is. Here is the part. And I read your piece and I listened to your interview with Glass-Steagall, where he correctly immediately added the UFO context, and and it was blown past there as well. No one has finished the thought. If he is not trying to raise to the audience the specter of that Jimmy Kimmel is either on the list or is more worried about protecting people on the list than, outing pedophiles, then what is he alleging? Why would Jimmy Kimmel not want the list out? If you don't think it's what I think it is, that he was trying to egg on his online army to do exactly what they did, which is Photoshop Kimmel's name into the list and try to attach him to it because these two guys are feuding. What was he doing? The second time that Rodgers said something, the thing that got this whole thing going, if it wasn't what I think, and what you accused lazy groupthink media of doing, what was it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think that needs to be answered. I think we can take people's literal words. I don't think we need to read into it and overlay a context that we want it to be. I think if there's somebody like an Aaron Rodgers, and this is my main perspective on the issue, I don't want to be Aaron Rodgers' defense attorney. I think he's a flawed guy. I think he's a narcissist. I think he is a lot of what you and Colin would claim him to be. High maintenance, he'll just tiresomely go on and on and on and on about whatever issue. But I think if a guy is flawed and has issues, we don't have to exaggerate it. We don't have to say he said something that he didn't say. And I think there's something wrong in media portrayals of this, portraying it as though this backstory does not exist, this back and forth between Kimmel, and that there isn't this possibly exonerating context. I mean, would you disagree with the following sequence? 1, Rodgers expresses an interest in the list on McAfee. 2, Kimmel mocks him for that interest and tells him that he should go into concussion protocol.
Yes, that
3,
is not what he mocked him for. He mocked him for saying that he was mocking the UFO stuff. That is the part that you have asserted. It's
I think it's a stretch.
It's what the audio and video shows us. It is what Kimmel's monologue is about UFOs. He then pulls a clip from McAfee and Rodgers talking about UFOs. And Rodgers then says, as you wrote, and I will again read it verbatim, did you hear about the Epstein client list that's about to be released too? That "to" word is meaning in addition to the UFO stuff. And then he says there's some files that have some names getting
wait a second. There's a gap. There's a gap between the UFO stuff and that particular comment because I watched the original clip of it. So it doesn't immediately follow that, which is why it's a strange edit, which is why if you see the Kimmel edit, it does jump around.
So you think that Jim Kimmel is specifically mocking Aaron Rodgers for interest in the Epstein list? As if that's not a massive story.
Yes, it's this guy is weird, kooky conspiracy guy, and this is part of that bouillabaisse, which I don't even think you would necessarily disagree with as an opinion, that a lot of people who are into weird conspiracies also fixate on the Epstein list. And this is part of what Kimmel is mocking. But my main point is that we don't have to read into it, that we don't have to say he suggested that Kimmel's a pedophile. He said Kimmel's on the list. Why? Because he did not literally say that. We don't have to overstate the case against somebody just because they're an asshole or they're flawed.
Wait a second. It's not overstating it. If someone wrote that Aaron Rodgers said Jimmy Kimmel is X, that's overstating it. The story was implied. The definition of the word implied is you didn't state it. You implied it. You alluded to it. That is the entire premise of the discussion. And where my issue is, you have no problem. Right now you're saying, if you didn't specifically say X, we have no reason to believe that is what you were implying. But you do
not no reason, but if you're calling balls and strikes and Rodgers says in a subsequent interview that I didn't mean this isn't what I was saying, and there is reason and context to say, hey, he went after me for talking about X, okay? That happened. And I said he doesn't really want X to come out. And that's the context. I think if you're calling balls and strikes, Nick, you would say the following. You would say there is reason for Jimmy Kimmel to think that this is what Rodgers is insinuating. And there is also reason, if you are a Rodgers guy, to say that, no, he was being attacked for talking about the list.
So then,
and I think, yes,
but if we're
I think
going
the issue is the media generally, I think, should be fair, even to a guy it hates, which is why I think I have a recurring.
Agree with.
Yes,
I agree with that. I thought the piece you wrote on, I'm a jerk now, the baseball player that everybody,
Trevor Bauer.
About Trevor Bauer. I thought that was a courageous piece to write, interesting. I didn't necessarily agree with all of it, but the general premise of your idea of can the media be fair to an asshole it hates I think is what the title of it. If I'm misquoting it, I apologize. I like that idea. The point I am making here is, and I am going to try to pin you down on, is I think you are now in this specific instance doing exactly what you dislike in reverse, which is I agree with you very often that a lot of what you would call the corporate media or whatever forms the winner or loser or the right or wrong side of a topic based on who is on each side rather than the merits of it. And then it kind of works backwards from there. I understand that case, and I find it, and I'm worthy of discussion. I think that in this instance, you saw everyone drawing the same conclusion, and instead of being open to the idea, they drew the conclusion because it is the obvious, clear one. You then called us all lazy and unfair. You said no one wants to actually research it. Nobody wants to actually be fair to Aaron Rodgers. And so I am now I'm asking you, and I think it's bullshit to be like, no, we don't have to. He said, we all agree, Jimmy Kimmel is hoping that list doesn't come out. My question to you for a second time is, why do you think your best guess, since you don't think it is it was clear to everyone else, what is the possible rationale that makes any of this make sense? Because where I'm at on this, it follows a very clear path, and I understand it. Where you're at on this doesn't as far as I can tell, there is no end of it. There is no end. And that's why this is it. So what is it? What is possible rationale?
I want your, I'm actually curious about your answer to that, because I have a theory, and this is reckless speculation, I would say, but I'll speculate. I'll follow you down this particular journey and positive theory. Yeah. But I want to know what you think he is literally saying. I want you to make a guess, getting in the mind of Aaron Rodgers, who does, and this is more speculation, look blazed out of his mind half the time that he's on these things. What do you think, A, that he actually thinks about Kimmel, and B, what he's trying to say? And I'll give mine.
I think that Aaron Rodgers, whose good friend, as you correctly included, and I give you credit for this, the Bakhtiari context of Bakhtiari flatly, do we agree? Bakhtiari flatly accused Jimmy Kimmel of being on the Epstein list. We agree with something that, right?
He should not do what he did. Yes.
Yeah. He said, tell me you're on the Epstein list without telling me you're on the Epstein list. When this whole thing started, Bakhtiari tweeted about Kimmel that Rodgers, who is not nearly as smart as he believes he is, but clearly bright in certain ways, I think correctly knew that there was a 0% chance that the Epstein list as a one item, chronology is ever going to exist. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't exist in theory, but
it's not like buried treasure that we're going to find.
Right.
Just one
it's
document.
Not the next Harry Potter book. It's like, okay, here it is. Read it.
Here are the bad guys.
Right. And so what I believe he was trying to do is weaponize, as I discussed on my podcast, the single worst thing you can be accused of, in my opinion, worse than saying this guy killed somebody, against someone he hates. Whether or not, so I don't claim to know whether or not Rodgers believes it or not. As far as was Kimmel's name ever on a list? I happen to think Rodgers believes a lot of things he reads on the internet, and there are different things on the internet that says Kimmel was on the list and all this bullshit. And so it maybe he believes it, maybe he doesn't. But I think he was very clearly trying to say that Jimmy Kimmel is nervous about this list coming out, that he doesn't want this list coming out. It was what he said. And so I find that to be the most, and the reason that I said, and I meant it, that he has crossed the line into dangerous, and you mocked me for it, was because
I did not specifically mock you for that, but continue. I do want to address that.
You said the media was hyperventilating about this, saying it was, and I'm not trying to be too self-important, but I think my monologue on this was one of the things that cut through.
It went viral.
And so I do think that's dangerous. I think that someone with credibility to large portions of America and a big platform saying that this guy, wink and a nod, might hurt children is dangerous. And you wrote in your piece, Rodgers' real beef should be with Bakhtiari. And my response there is, in theory, yes. But in reality, if you say, damn, on this podcast that I know a lot of important people in the industry, influential people listen to, it's popular, it's well done. If you say, man, Nick stole a take, the concept of Mahomes Mountain, he stole it from somebody.
Oh, you would never.
And someone with 200 Twitter followers, none of which are in media, said, everything Nick's ever said on television is plagiarized. I am much more likely going to be far bothered and have far big of a problem with you than with the other guy, even though the other guy's allegation is technically worse because your allegation carries weight, because your allegation has an audience. So, of course, Kimmel, who a lot of people are not going to even know who David Bakhtiari is, much less follow him and know it, he's going to take more issue with the guy on the Pat McAfee show. All of that makes sense to me.
You're answering another question that you were put into me of what do I think Kimmel's doing? Do I think Kimmel is going after Rodgers because he thinks Rodgers is goofy about the UFOs? No. If I had to, and yes, this is my speculation, if I had to guess what's going on, this whole rigmarole, and eventually we will leave the Talmudic parsing of words and this crazy saga and get into these more meta media issues, I think what happened is that Kimmel went after Rodgers over the vax stuff. Bakhtiari, in his misguided effort to support his buddy, put the Epstein stuff out about Kimmel. And then that made Kimmel and whoever's around him hypersensitive. And then when Rodgers brings up the Epstein stuff, then that gets highlighted in the monologue and he goes after Rodgers, leading to this whole rigmarole where ESPN has this crazy decision to make about the Pat McAfee show and what the hell to do about it. And we are talking today on a day that it's been announced that Rodgers is no longer going to appear on it this season. That's what I think has happened if I had to guess what happened.
So let me respond to that real quick, and then I ranted for so long I never got your answer.
I can get that as well.
I agree that Kimmel has a grudge against Rodgers. I agree that Kimmel has probably singled him out because of vaccine stuff initially. I agree with all of that. And were I a media reporter, maybe I would focus more on that part of it. But while that might be unfair or not nice, it is so exponentially far from this guy hopes this list of pedophiles doesn't come out. It's night and day. And so at no point have I acted like I think Kimmel is a hero in this or any of that, or that Rodgers, as much as I think he's a phony and dishonest and all of it, doesn't have legitimate reason to think this guy's an asshole and dislike him. But that to me is a totally separate thing. So you said you had an answer or an idea. If he was not alleging that, what was it?
I think the more charitable version of Rodgers trying to stigmatize Kimmel in such a way would be, you've got friends, you've got associates. Kimmel is friends with a guy who I guess was a chef of Epstein. I don't know what Rodgers thinks he knows, but I think the more charitable interpretation, if you were to go deeper than he's just reacting to Kimmel's reaction, would be, you don't want your friends to come up on that list. And that is what's being alleged right there. So the specificity of saying, oh, he's saying that Kimmel's a pedo, I think that's going too far. And just in general, I don't think when people are flawed and when they are, as you put it, dangerous, I don't think there's a necessity to overstate the case. And that is generally what
I
I'm
agree
saying.
with you. And I think you went out of your way to stick your fingers in your ear and understate it. I think that this was an instance where a lot of people who you think are phony or full of it all agreed on something, and you started from a place of they must be wrong. And what I'm saying is, I think this was one of those instances where, as it happened, the general knee-jerk reaction was the knee-jerk reaction, not because we have good guys and bad guys, but because something was so fucking obvious. Anyone that is being fair and honest about it would have the same reaction. Because you're someone that I think is very smart and does important work. I was at a poker game, having a couple cocktails, having a great time when you text me the first time. And I told you, I'm reading the article now, and I text you back and I was like, I'm legitimately angry. I meant it. Like, I was legit. It like ruined it. It upset my night because people that I don't respect or I don't think are bright or whatever, like I don't really care their opinions on things. You fall far into a very, very different category. And I reread it. I listened to your thing the moment it came out. I went back and watched all of the stuff, to make sure like I wasn't missing anything. And I'm like, nope, it's pretty clear what's happening here. And so that's it. We don't have to spend the whole time on it. And
I was about to ask you. I was about to ask you if you think this is great radio or terrible radio, because I almost feel like at a certain point when we're discussing this issue in this granular way where most people don't have the context, I feel like Aaron Rodgers 20 minutes into a Pat McAfee session talking about, I don't even know, studies on anti-malarials or whatever.
It's not that, because none of us are just totally talking out of our ass. So it's certainly not that, but go ahead. Sorry.
I think we could bring it to this more general place and the specificity of Kimmel versus Rodgers and whatnot. I do think that there is this sense of, in media, double standards and not playing it fair and not going, this guy is flawed or he talks out of his ass sometimes. I think there is this sense of, wait a second, one day you're presenting me with an Aaron Rodgers who you're telling me is a brilliant guy and he's going to host he's going to host Jeopardy. And the next day, everybody is in lockstep in any sort of prestigious position. And it's that this guy is an idiot. He's soft-brained. He went to a junior college, as Jimmy Kimmel was saying, which I thought was a strange move by Kimmel.
Yeah, I thought that was, I personally, if I may, just real quick, I thought the low-hanging fruit of going after the guy's educational bona fides was undercut Kimmel's what could have been, I think, a stronger, takedown, if you will. I agree with you. I thought that was foolish, but go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think there's this sense of double standards, and also how I disagree with you. I don't think he's dangerous. I don't think he is correct about some things. There are things that he says on that program that I don't agree with and I don't think are helpful to put out there. Principally, I don't see much evidence that the anti-malarials and ivermectin has the benefits that he says it does. And
shit.
I don't want to go back to like just drag us back into the rabbit hole of 2021, which I think is part of this whole story. I think there are a lot of people who don't even have an issue with what Rodgers is saying, but just feel like, I don't want to go back there emotionally. I don't want to think about Anthony Fauci. Those were the worst couple years of my life.
Right. If I can jump in for a second, I can meet you part of the way, right? So I do think that it would be helpful for us societally if we could, without our pride. I'm gonna have to back up to one of my favorite kind of analogies, if you will, and I'll build the bridge. I promise.
I love it.
So I believe that. So once upon a time, the only people whose opinions were recorded were people in our position, right? In the media with a platform. And when that was the case, writers, broadcasters, whatever, the average American, I think, changed their mind all the time. It's like, I believed this, but now I believe this. But now, about everything that really matters, everyone to their own community is, to bring up a sports topic you and I don't see eye to eye on, is me and Brock Purdy.
I love it.
It's like, well, God damn it. I have really planted my flag here. And if I, you know what I mean? If I back down or whatever it is, I have egg on my face. So I think that has caused massive problems. That people who in the past, if they were a huge Trump supporter or Biden supporter 8 years ago, whatever, only their closest circle would know. And they could then be like, well, I thought it was going to go this way. It went this way. Now I feel totally different. People feel married to it because I got these tweets up and everybody knows where I was. And so I don't want to move. I say all that to say this. I think it'd be useful if we could almost have, a nationwide truce and be like, hey, none of your COVID opinions you held for these 2 years are going to be held against you. No one's going to throw it in your face. Can we have a real discussion about what happened there, about, taking rims off basketball hoops outdoors, and about this and about that? So if and when we are faced with something like this again, we can take the things we did well and emphasize those and stay away from things we didn't. I think that conversation is a useful one. And I do think the reason I bring it up in this context is I do think that you're right in that people are almost afraid in some ways to venture into some of those conversations because now I'm going to align with the out crowd or you know what I mean? Whatever it is. Yeah. So I think what you're discussing there is a real problem. And it's one of the reasons I admire some of the stuff you do. And so I agree with the general premise of that on this specific, like on the everyone turning on Rodgers. I think it is lazy is the wrong word. I think it's too easy of an out for Rodgers to be like, they hated me until they heard my vaccine. They loved me, and then the vaccine thing turned them off. I think for far more people, it was the outright lying and disingenuousness that was then followed up by a very similar level of lying and disingenuousness in relation to your football career, the same exact beats of the no, I'd never, of course I obviously did, that we have now seen played out on 4 different football-related things that made everyone be like, this guy is just a sanctimonious phony. And I think he uses as an armor, and I think some of his defenders use as an armor of, you just don't like him because he stood up to big pharma. while, being paid $40 million by a big pharma era, of course. I mean, really stood up.
Yeah, and this is why I'm not Aaron Rodgers' defense attorney. I mean, the weird thing is, this is a strange take maybe, but the first time he lied back in the day of fall of 2021 with the immunized, I don't have much of a problem with that initial lie. It's the second lie that I think cuts more to the core of why he can be a tiresome figure. When he was called on it, I would have been totally fine with him going, well, you got me. You got me. I was under pressure. It's a press conference. I didn't want to, create a media firestorm. I said some shit and I lied. My bad. But instead, he did this didactic, this sort of, well, I said immunize, and aren't I clever that I didn't specifically lie because I was crossing my fingers behind my back. I think the second lie speaks more, yes, to a character flaw, and also did to what you're saying, give some insight into why, well, this guy is great and one of the greatest quarterbacks and has stood the test of time until maybe right now as a guy you can succeed with despite these flaws. A very high maintenance individual and somebody who's difficult to deal with.
Right. And then what made it to me far worse was, because I agree with you entirely. And that if you had just been like, all right, got me, I have strong opinions on a lot of things. I try to not publicize, a lot of them earlier in my career. I wasn't trying to step into this. If anyone feels like I made them, I put them at risk because they thought I was, I disagree that I did that, but, if whatever. But it was not only that he did exactly that, but then on things as small as the Packers ghosted me. And then the Packers GM's called him a bunch. And he's like, oh, yeah, everybody knows I don't have phone service and you have to FaceTime me. And it's like, oh, so this is oh my God, I can't believe the shoddy journalism that said I had a list of players for the Jets to sign. And then Diana Rossini is like, you definitely did. Maybe it wasn't demands, it was recommendations, but it was Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, Tim Boyle, whomever. And then the Jets sign all those people. And when he's asked about it, he's like, well, of course they asked my opinion. I've been in the league 15 years. And I told them, guys, and it's just like, oh, okay. So you're just going to flagrantly bullshit. And when called on it, you're going to still somehow be like, what are you talking about? I was bullshitting. And that, to me, I think people find incredibly tiresome. I think people find that to be a true character flaw. And I think that's why the juxtaposition of Monday at his, end of season press conference, him giving a quote saying, one of the number one things we as a Jets franchise need to do is get all the bullshit out of the building that doesn't have to do with winning. All of that needs to be done. It needs to be about winning and about football. And literally within 2 minutes of that, saying, yeah, you can hear me tomorrow on the Pat McAfee show discuss the Jimmy Kimmel, Anthony Fauci battle I'm in. It's like, it's just such a lack of self-awareness. I think people find that repellent far more than whether or not they think it was, part of being a responsible citizen of the world to get vaccinated. I just think it's an easy off-ramp of oh, you don't like me because of, my strong beliefs, as opposed to you don't like me because I'm not fucking likable.
Yeah, I could anger you further about how he does remind me of another great player in the other sport who plays in Los Angeles as a high maintenance guy with a lot of passive aggression who sometimes is disingenuous, but we don't necessarily need to go down that route. It's ironic.
There are some similarities. I would, and we don't have to go down this road entirely. I would argue strongly that while there are some similarities, it is not more than surface level. Also, I wonder if on the vaccine stuff, I wonder how much the guy you're talking about agrees with a lot of the stuff Aaron's saying.
Well,
like, I've never quite nailed that down.
That's a whole subplot that we haven't even gotten into, which is how many people within the NFL, I'm sure a lot of them are rolling their eyes at him pontificating and going on, but there must be some support for what he's saying. It seems like the only person who's had an issue with this tack he's taken is Travis Kelce, because he attacked Travis Kelce for being Mr. Pfizer or whatever. So It does seem to be one of those chasms between athlete opinion and the media. It's ironic because I often offer the PR advice for bastards and scoundrels. I call it dad, don't apologize, double down. But I do think everybody would have been just better out of this if, as we were saying, Rodgers had copped to the initial lie when caught red-handed. And I think that, I mean, maybe this is envisioning life too much like a corny movie when we're talking about a pissing contest between two famous guys. But I think if Kimmel had said, look, what Rodgers is insinuating about me is wrong, and I'm just going to unilaterally disarm right here, and I'm going to say, I shouldn't have said that he was putting people at risk back then. I know now better than I knew then, and that was wrong. It doesn't excuse what he did, but we all need to basically come together. Everybody slow claps. I don't know. I think that would have been better. But to what you're saying, everybody, nobody's going to change their mind. Nobody's going to really give an inch. We are in this conversation, but not generally when people are at war.
No, and who's McAfee has referenced a number of times that people were calling Aaron a murderer. Did that actually, like, is that one of those things where people are saying and it's like a few random tweets, or was that like, because if there was anyone with any platform or prominence saying that, because that's the other part of this that to me, and the most interesting part of sorry, I do this thing where I
okay.
apologize. I can get on tangents. I do feel like Aaron's was really like a lot of people changed and scarred.
Yes,
by
this is key.
The COVID era. And I think he is truly wounded by some of the things said about him, said to him. And I think it really changed him. And that, because I'm an empathetic person, at least I try to be, that makes me sad. Like, I feel badly because I know he's big on, I'm not a victim, I don't care, say whatever you want about me. He just says all these things because he doesn't want to align with the groups that he thinks would call themselves victims or whatever. But he acts like someone who was victimized by something and is still dealing with it. And like that, he was really deeply wounded by it. And that part makes me sad. Like, I'm like, man, that sucks. And maybe I just wasn't online enough or paying enough attention to what the fringes were saying about him when it came to the COVID stuff.
I remember the mainstream was pretty brutal, and 2021 was, it was still a very emotional time, and people didn't know what they know now. But I'd have to run it through a LexisNexis as far as him getting called a murderer. I didn't see that, but you're getting at something. I just want to say that you're getting at something very deep, which is that I think most people are in the camp of, oh, not this again. I mean, they probably feel this way about us talking about it. Like, not 2021 again, not Fauci again. I don't want to return there. I don't want to think about it. I'm so glad things are normal now. I don't want to return. But there's this other contingent, and it is not small. And in a weird way, Rodgers, perhaps for selfish reasons, has become something of their tribune of people who can't get over it. And I don't say it's
the touchstone of so much of how they view the world currently. Correct. And I don't say it pejoratively either. And that is where I'm being like, and it is the other part that for me, Rodgers, the reason the Rodgers stuff is so interesting is he is, in my opinion, the first true superstar athlete we have that went all the way down the internet rabbit hole to where it became their own reality. And when you saw we all have people in our lives that this happened to, and we all know people, or I shouldn't say we all have people. I certainly have people in my lives. I think most people do. And for a lot of these people, the moment it went from like something they flirted with, a little eccentricity, whatever, was the COVID era. And whether it was distrust of government or more time or whatever. And it seemed like that Kyrie was maybe going to be that guy. And then Kyrie, I think, this is a sidebar, but I'll believe to my last day, Kyrie never watched that movie.
Yeah,
the
I
thing
agree.
but he posted it, didn't watch the 2-hour documentary, and then got pissed. People were telling him to take it down, and instead of just being like, guys, my bad, didn't watch it, saw this clip or whatever, thought it was interesting, sorry. He then, because he doesn't want anyone to ever tell him what to do, was like, bleep you. I believe it. And now all of a sudden, Kyrie, for all his flaws, I do not think that guy is a hateful person towards anyone, any groups. All of a sudden, he's defending himself against anti-Semitism because he didn't want to just admit, I never watched it. I didn't get to the Hitler part of this thing, guys. Sorry. And so I think that there is, but because of that, I think Kyrie, whatever he believes or doesn't believe, I think he was like, that was not fun. And I am not going to, publicly espouse this anymore. Aaron's gone a very different way. Aaron,
this is going to sound crazy. Sorry to interject, but you can see his competitive nature in him not letting this go. When he was on McAfee, he was talking about Jimmy Kimmel's opinions on the vaccine. He said, that was an L. That was an L for him. And it's just, are we in a competition? What's happening here?
And that's what he's saying. He was saying, and then the Epstein thing would have been another L. It's exactly right. He is looking at and then when he's like, I'll debate you, we can do these things. It is a very odd
we've got Epstein at week 13 on the schedule, and we've got ivermectin on week 14.
Yeah. That is what is happening.
You're getting at some stuff though, because one of the reasons why I think I don't want to call it a rant against your monologue. It's not even that, because you're in conversation on your podcast. But whatever you said about him, one of the reasons why it went viral is because you did bring it to that place, the feeling of losing people down these rabbit holes, which I think can be a matter of perspective sometimes. This might be a weird tangent to take it, but I was thinking about it, and I was thinking there's something strange about Rodgers. Let's just say he's got some crazy opinions. Let's say let's call him a conspiracy theorist. I don't know. That's what's getting thrown around. Let's just let's throw that. The weird thing about that is that in the broader media conversation, that is grounds for being a freak and somebody who is regarded as crazy. But in real life, a lot of people are like this. Just a lot, like a normal person is crazy is what I'm saying. I mean, this is a weird example to draw from, but I have a neighbor and he is the most popular guy in the neighborhood. He leads a rich and fulfilling life. He has kids. Everybody in the neighborhood would say this guy is a psychologically healthy guy, a fantastic guy. And at some point in conversation with him, he not only posited that 9/11 is an inside job, Nick, but he pulled the move of being surprised that I didn't think that. It was one of these like, wait, you think
you don't believe that?
Yeah. Just a hell of a move. And so I think there's this aspect of me when I see this kind of thing happen where maybe I have a little more tolerance for it and I worry less about it getting into the cultural bloodstream, and I have a little bit more of a mentality of, well, some people are like this, and maybe the broader media shouldn't be so hidebound about it and just accept that there is a range of opinion out there, and we're not going to lose our minds because some people go off the deep end.
Sure, I think that one of the reasons there has been this type of response and almost anger towards either Pat or the show or the network or whatever, not just take the Rodgers Kimmel feud aside,
Yeah.
is it does feel like to some that, yeah, there are a lot of people that have a lot of crazy opinions. And it is frustrating that there were real consequences for a lot of people that had extreme opinions on race, policing, criminal justice. Those the real extreme opinions on those were not. We all have friends or family or people that believe in full blown abolition, right? There are people that believe in that, not defund, but abolish. We have people that believe, and the moment those ideas were flirted with in these spaces, it was a full-blown pivot to guys, gals, we are sports, and this is the focus, and this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
But now, because I think there is something of an understanding, and I think this is frustrating for some people, that there is more of a that people of certain beliefs are less likely to hear something they disagree with and then be like, I will never watch or listen to your network or your show again. And so it's almost the squeaky wheel philosophy, right? Which is, but if people are like and will be loud, like, nope, you're too woke, I'm out. I think there was a real fear of alienating this group. And then all of a sudden, I think there were some people being like, whoa, the rules got to cut both ways. It's got, and so I think that was some of the adverse reaction to this happening in the first place. You keyed on the point which is, this is very odd television. And that this is just like an odd spot to be having.
By the way, I mean, I didn't anticipate us talking so much about it, but I think we just have a bunch of thoughts, and it's a fascinating, crazy circumstance. The weird thing nobody's saying is that Aaron Rodgers is an excellent guest on that show when he's talking football. So it's all part of this crazy bouillabaisse where I'm going to tell you things about QB cadence that you never have heard before, and I'm going to bring you behind the scenes, and we're going to talk about Fauci.
So why do you think, so let me ask you this before we go.
Yeah.
Why do you think he's not going to be on the rest of the playoffs?
Yeah, what are the machinations behind the scenes of that? Did McAfee, did he just think the block was too hot? It felt good for a while being the big man. Yeah, machinations, as producer Mays says in the chat. And telling them off and saying, look, I run this, you don't run this. It's hard for me to speculate because who knows what they went over in whatever contractual whatever.
So here's the reason I bring it up. One thing we totally agree on. I would be super interested in hearing Aaron talk about these playoff games and these quarterbacks. When he has talked football, it's been awesome. I've not been that interested in him talking about the Jets because it's weird and they stink. And I'm not interested in all of this other nonsense. And I wasn't that interested in hearing him talk about his Achilles rehab, which was another thing that I felt he was wholly disingenuous about. But the rare times that we've actually talked football, or heard him talk football, it's been very good, right? So this to me is a fascinating reality. I shouldn't say reality, but possibility. Aaron Rodgers just couldn't be trusted to go in front of a live microphone for a half hour once a week and just talk football. Right? 40-year-old face of a franchise, one of the faces of the league. It was like, hey, man, we have this guy who would be great talking about these things. The playoffs are starting. And because we can't trust him, we're just going to cut it off. Like it's in a similar way. Like I was trying to at one point see if we could get Garnett as a regular basketball contributor and someone who knows him. someone who knows him told me, he was like, you just can't do it live. Like, he's great, he's awesome, but like he is going to drop a ton of F-bombs, and our show is truly live, like it wouldn't work. And that's like almost more of a cuter, can't trust him, but it is like, oh, just can't.
Yeah.
You know, and I hope if KG sees this, man, nothing but love and respect for you. I'm not taking a shot, just what I was told. But I imagine KG subscribes to your Substack.
He's a huge House of Strauss guy.
He's a big
as is
subscriber on this.
Jimmy Kimmel, as is Aaron Rodgers. They're all subscribed.
But that's fascinating to me. Just can't trust him. Like, can't do it.
It is, because he's the face of a multi-billion-dollar company.
That's why it's so fascinating. It's not like he's some retired crank. Like they're gonna trust him to lead this team to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But Pat can't trust him for a half hour a week to talk about CJ Stroud against Joe Flacco. It's unbelievable.
Okay, so I don't know when your hard out is here, but I do want your thoughts on some of this. Do you feel like you can be totally candid, by the way? Because there is sensitivity when you're on the other channel, and you don't want to be seen as taking shots necessarily. And I know that you're not someone who does when it comes to this space, but
Never.
do you feel like you can candidly give an assessment of the general McAfee show of it all when looking across the transom and
I think I definitely can, but I'm not going to. I think I have the ability, like I'm capable of it, but it's just not my thing. I don't, I kind of made a decision a long time ago that I just don't want to be that guy. And the only time I'm going to talk about anything in the space that I do is going to be when I think something's awesome. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm not going to lie about thinking something's awesome, but I'm not going to, I'm just not going to do it. So no, sorry.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I will say, and you're not saying it, that I'm more fixated on the distinction between a show like yours and a show like the McAfee show, which was a successful YouTube show, but by their own admission has a certain kind of structurelessness. And what I would say, because I always lavishly compliment your show, first things first, the structure just seems so important. And that seems like it's an underrated part of this whole story, which is that, I mean, maybe you can't trust Aaron, but maybe if there's more of a structure, you can. I'm just so interested in how you guys do what you do.
The article you wrote two articles on this. The one that wasn't about, what did or didn't.
The one
Aaron
that pissed
say.
you off, and the one that I don't think pissed you off.
Yeah, exactly. I think you raised some interesting points, which is what audiences expect and what is considered awesome if you're consuming it via a telephone screen or a computer screen versus via a television screen. I think in a lot of our brains, it's like that shouldn't change anything. But I think somewhere subconsciously it does. And we just have different thoughts or feelings, or whether we're having them or not, on what we expect to receive. You know what I mean? Depending on the medium that we're receiving it from. And I think it was an astute point. And maybe that, by the way, is going to eventually be a relic of the past. But Simmons, I think, said to Wilds once on one of their podcasts, like during the writer's strike or actor strike or something, that one of these channels that he followed some Instagram or TikTok feed or whatever, which was, I don't even remember what it was, but it was basically, America's Funniest Home Videos, but 20 seconds at a time. And it was just like hilarious injuries, you know what I mean? But not serious injuries, or, it's something stupid that you scroll through, whatever. Yeah. And I think, I hope I'm not misquoting him. I think Simmons was like, man, he was like, I can find myself watching this for 20 minutes, and kind of said jokingly, like, there's no shows. One of these channels should put that on. And I thought of that when I read he was kidding, obviously, but I thought of it when I read your article, which was, like we all know intuitively that would not work. Even if we also know intuitively that page gets 30 million views, you know what I mean? Whatever. It's uber successful right here. and just wouldn't work if you were flipping the channels. And I can't, diagnose why that's the case, but I think that is true. And so I don't know.
Well, it's funny because maybe this is a mistake because I'm crossing mediums, but I have been looking to your show, which I generally try to time up the opening of your show with when I leave this office to get lunch
Nice.
out on the West Coast. But I think maybe I should have some structure on House of Strauss. Maybe I should have some regular segments. Now, that might be me making the same sort of mistake and applying TV principles, but I do think that there are general principles about expectations and regular segments that you can learn something from.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's obviously the exception to all of these things, but I think most of the, kind of successful frameworks have been pretty well established. For our show, we didn't set out to do this, but what we ended up following was the model inside the NBA created. It's not like we were trying to copy them and it just kind of, and I'm not at all saying we're them because that's been the best show on TV for forever, but we just ended up kind of falling into that where the star of the show is the relationships, you know what I mean, of the people. That's what makes people feel connected to the show. But there is a reason why, to go to the late night shows, like Letterman, you knew every day you were getting a top 10 list. You knew there is the whole benchmark idea in media seems to work. You mentioned when you were talking Glass-Steagall, and we used to have none on First Things First, and Wilds was like, we got to have them. And Wilds knows a ton about TV because he's created TV, and he's like, you just got to have them. He's like, just trust me, you got to have them. And when you were talking to Glass-Steagall, you were like, I look forward to Mahomes Mountain. That's just something we created, but now it is something that people know Tuesdays at 4:00. That's going to be there. And so it feels it. And I also think it's along the same lines of people will pay as much attention as you are. So it's important on the show when someone else is talking that the other people seem interested. Now they can seem annoyed or they can seem, they can think it's funny, dumb, angering, whatever. What they can't be doing is visibly not paying attention because then the audience is like, why am I paying attention? Logically along the same path is if the show looks like it took a lot of people to put together and there's a lot of work put into it, it feels like more worth your time. You know what? And so I think that keys to the audience. Oh, there's a lot happening here. And so I do think that, is helpful or important.
Well, that reminds me of this counterintuitive thing, which is that some of my most viral articles are 5,000 words and people say nobody reads 5,000 words. But when you write 5,000 words, it announces, hey, I just made a big effort right here. The thought was put into this right here. But, I want to ask a couple questions about your mindset with the show, and then we can get on out of here. Unless you have anything more to grill me about.
No, I'm good. I'll answer the questions, then I'll go pick my wife up from work.
I don't want your wife to be, alone in the cold, not being picked up. So we'll proceed. We'll proceed with haste. Oh, one thing I just want to say without being a topic. Nick's tears is my favorite. Mahomes Mountain, I enjoy. Like everybody else, I get mad at you for including the college quarterbacks, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah. But I like it's almost literary how, and I just invite somebody without explaining it to check out that segment when you rank the teams thematically. I think that is the most as a writer. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a very nice compliment because that is. The actual order, the general order the teams are going to be in is not that difficult. But finding a way to stay true to the general order and being able to come up with a 5-word or less tier name is the real work in that. And I'm not a writer. So I appreciate that. That is my favorite segment as well. And so that's a compliment that resonates. So I appreciate that. But go ahead. What were your questions?
Well, I'm a big fan of the show, and I'm often defending it because people, and this is, how this whole dynamic between us has started, where you assumed I was one of the people who would like look down on you
roll
or not
roll
like
their eyes
you.
at what I do. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Which a lot of people, frankly, do without knowing. They've seen a clip here or there. They haven't interfaced with it. They assume it's daytime sports TV, so it must be dumb. And it's not. A lot of thought does go into it. It's smart. It's funny. I'd recommend it. The last thing we'll address is, because I think this gives an insight into you as a takesman. Can you explain category 1, category 2?
Oh, yeah. Category
3?
3? Yeah, so I came up with this mid-show one day, and sometimes I'm just like, oh, this is great. Like and I know that sounds arrogant. I don't mean to. But there's a lot of things sometimes I'll just say on the air that I'm like, oh, okay, well, that'll never be said again. That's thrown away. But there's a few that I haven't planned at all that I stumbled into. Like last February, I just said out of nowhere, and Wilds plays along great. I'm like, Wilds, as you know, my New Year's resolution was be less humble. And Wilds just was like, oh, yeah, of course. And I never said that to him anything. And then it just all year long, I was able to reference like, well, I don't want to do this, but you know what my resolution is. So one day, I don't even remember what it was. I just said, listen, I have 3 types of takes. Category 1, instantly correct. That's like, who's going to win tonight? And I'm right. Category 2, eventually correct. And that is my favorite type and the most satisfying type. And category 3, immediately wrong. Just like dead on wrong. And so when we have talked about like Brock Purdy, and he has a perfect passer rating and they're trying to throw it in my face or whatever, I'm like, listen, guys, we just all know this is going to be a classic category 2 of where I'm eventually correct. And then he has the game against the Ravens and I get to, peacock about it or whatever. But I do think about it that way. And now so the Chiefs this season though have a really, Jokic winning the title and being dominant is like a vintage, as bad as it gets, category 3. Like I was wrong every step of the way, never gave any quarter, and I have nowhere to go on it. The Chiefs, who I picked to go 20-0, if they lose in round 1, it's, a pretty bad category 3. If they rebound from this awful regular season and win the Super Bowl, even though I picked them to go 20-0, it's still a classic category 2. Like I was just eventually right about it. Took longer than I thought, but I was right.
Well, I think you are a Bayesian. You come in with your priors and you are slow to adjust them. And that is not a criticism. It's a different way of going about things, because sometimes you can end up more correct more often than not, just because the natural inclination is to be prisoner of the moment, which is why you have self-titled yourself Mr. Consistency.
Mr. Consistency, that's right.
In contrast with your compatriots.
Our show is so dumb. Our show, Wild said it to me the other day. He's like, can you imagine if you watched the first 30 minutes of our Monday show and within 1 minute of us talking about the Dolphins, there's break dancers on the stage, and the question about the Cowboys is, are they officially S-Bob or not? He's like, if you've never watched the show, do you even understand it? It's like, yeah, I don't know, but that's what we're doing.
Well, it's like Arrested Development or one of these shows becomes quite self-referential. You've got to pick up your wife. I have no idea if the first 20 to 30 minutes of what we did was great radio or terrible radio, but we'll throw it up there all the same.
It was cathartic for me. I'll tell you that much. You know what? It was cathartic for me. Your guy Mays it says it was great. He wrote an hour ago, when I said about how upset I was at the article, he wrote, "You let Ethan into your heart and he disappointed you," which was really just a great line.
Oh, you can just call me Trevor Lawrence then.
Okay.
You can.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you, Nick. See ya.